The Dualshock 4 controller is expensive and suffers from a host of analog-related issues, so I've been buying and reviewing alternatives on this channel. Today I have another one. I'm going to quickly examine it, test it out on some games, and give you my opinion on whether or not it's a worthwhile alternative to the Dualshock 4. I'll also take a quick look at what other reviewers are saying about it. So this is a wireless controller I found on a typo-laden Amazon listing for $38. It is sold by a company called KINGEAR. It has all the features of the DualShock 4, including rumble, audio jack, touchpad, and a speaker, which the listing calls a horn. Here's my first impressions of each button and how they compare to the DualShock. The square, triangle, X, and O buttons are a little bit closer together and have rounded tops. They aren't allowed to use the traditional symbols on the buttons, which isn't a big deal to me. The PlayStation button is about the same size, but it's much easier to push down. It seems like it'll be easy to accidentally press it. The touchpad is actually bigger and not as smooth. There are these little depressed dimples on it. Pressing down feels a bit clunky. The D-pad feels very flat, so when you press it, it hardly feels like it's moving. I don't think that'll be a big deal. The analog sticks come out further than the DualShocks. They are smoother and therefore more slippery. There's not as much of a rounded nub on the top, so that too makes it more slippery. The share and option buttons come out further and take a tiny bit more pressure to press. I prefer them over the DualShock's low profile ones. All four shoulder buttons are pretty much exact copies of the DualShocks, but when you press L2 and R2, the distance it travels when you press it is about half as much. This could be either a good thing or a bad thing depending on what type of game you are playing. The listing says it's heavier than the DualShock, but I can't tell much of a difference. The feel though is a lot different. The handles are smaller. It's hard to see here, but it's like they took the DualShock's handles and squeezed them when making the mold. People with big hands may not feel comfortable using this controller. Not a problem for me though. A 4-foot long micro USB cord is included. It's not long enough to play while hooked up to the system, so let's test it out in some games. First, a couple of first-person shooters. I chose Titanfall 2 and Killzone Shadowfall because I'm good at both of them. I'll be able to tell if my performance suffers as a result of the new controller. I realize anytime you start using a third-party controller, your performance is going to be impacted, so I gave myself plenty of time to get used to it before forming an opinion. And after getting used to it, I can confirm that my performance did in fact suffer. The analog sticks are too sensitive. When I turned to shoot something, it turned too fast and too far, causing me to miss easy targets. I had the same problems with trying to throw projectiles. I went to Gamepad Tester.com to verify the issue. What you do on that site is you just go to it and you connect your controller to the computer and it'll show values for each button. Pressing one of the standard buttons like the triangle will give you a value of 1, and not pressing it gives you a 0. For the two analog sticks, you have one value for up and down and one value for left and right. Pressing one of them all the way to the right gives you a value of 1, while pressing it all the way to the left gives you a value of -1. When pushing slightly in one of those directions, you get values in between. On the DualShock 4, when I push about halfway right, I get a value of about 0.5. All these numbers get fed into your PS4 and tell your character how to move. For the KINGEAR controller, it's much harder to get those in-between values. I am able to get -1 and 1 without even pushing all the way. My camera has trouble focusing here, but you can kind of see that I'm getting a value of -1, but the stick isn't all the way over to the left. The only way to get the values between -1 and 1 is to barely move the stick. Basically, it's too easy to get the extreme values of -1 and 1 to the PS4, and it's too hard to send the values that are in between. So you end up moving too quickly and too far in the games. One way to compensate is to operate in a very small radius, just gently pressing the analog stick as you play. It's not very fun and it's tricky to do. You can also try lowering the sensitivity on the in-game menu. I did that and it helped a little bit. But in the end, I would say my overall performance was down about 20% compared to playing with the DualShock. There is also an increase in truly embarrassing moments. I did not have issues with the other buttons. The Gamepad Tester did reveal the same oversensitivity with the R2 and L2 buttons, but that wasn't much of an issue in these particular games. Not many games support the Dualshock's swipe function, but I wanted to test it anyway. The Killzone campaign mode utilizes it. I played a little bit of it, and the swiping worked as expected. I also played Tetris Effect, a game that mostly uses the D-pad as opposed to the analog sticks. It was uncomfortable. I'm not sure exactly why, but I felt the little muscles in my left thumb start to ache after about 10 minutes. I think it's because the D-pad doesn't pivot like the DualShock 4. It takes more work to change direction. I also tested the controller in VR. While in VR, the camera needs to see the light on your controller in certain games. The light on the KINGEAR is much smaller. I was able to play, but every once in a while it lost track of the controller, causing me to have to resync it. It only takes a few seconds though. I think the issue is the small size of the light. Sitting close to the camera should help. Overall in VR, I would say that this controller just meets the minimum requirements. Before I give you my final opinion, let's look at some reviews on Amazon. This one seems to say that it doesn't have Bluetooth. I played wirelessly with it, so I don't know how it could do that without Bluetooth. Another review says it's problematic with first-person shooters because of the sticks not moving properly enough for you to kill people. I know how you feel, bud. Another person said the analog sticks were slow. I would say it's just the opposite. They are too fast. This one says, this is my second attempt with this item, and it is what it's not. It is what it's not. That's kind of deep. They go on to say that they had trouble hearing people and people had trouble hearing them in the voice chat. I did chat in one of the games that I played, and I did not experience those problems. This one says a button broke after 5 minutes. It was probably the analog stick, so that's very concerning. Here's a negative review in German. I'm not sure what it says, but look what happened to their controller. Germans must have strong hands. So here's my overall advice. Do not get this controller. The analog sticks are going to impair your precision. As you saw, it was confirmed using the Gamepad Tester website, and it was confirmed by me while playing games I'm familiar with. I know PS4 controller solutions are hard to come by, but this one isn't the way to go. That's all I had today. May your games make you happy and smart, and may people respect you for playing them. So long, everybody.